Redditors who joined the military and regretted it. What made you regret it? I regret the last 6 years I was in. It cost me my marriage, my sanity, health, and all around sucked the joy out of life. The stupid game got really stupid in those last 6 years. Truth is, if I had reclassed to a different MOS, I'm sure I would have been happier and would still be in. But no, I chose to stay in the infantry for 6 more years. Once I got out, I felt 125% better about myself and my life. Edit, I do not regret the first 6 years I did. If you are planning on joining the military, give it serious thought and for the love of God choose an MOS with civilian side applications. If it's what you want to do in the end, do it. No doubt the infantry is just a different culture. It takes a certain type in my experience. I was in communications but had some buddies in the infantry. Most loved it, they had that sort of fatalistic mentality, night combat drop followed by PT 3 hours later. They complained, but they were also bragging about it later on and how hardcore they were blah blah. As far as I'm concerned, if you are not wired that way it would be a nightmare, would have been for me. Been in 12 years now, and I feel like most people regret it, in some form or fashion during their time. That doesn't mean that you regret it all the time, but it certainly has its moments. Even guys with the cool jobs have regrets about things. I fly Apaches for the Army, which is arguably the coolest job out there, but just like any job, it sucks sometimes. Sexual assault on U.S. Navy ships is constant and is swept under the rug. Reporting assault is drilled in by PowerPoints, but actually reporting can lead to alienation, harassment, or still having to work in close quarters with the person that assaulted you. Males and females. I left after 7 years. The reason I regretted joining is that I never got to use the skills I trained for. It's the main reason I left. I'd see the same people getting cycled back onto deployment and I'd be stuck in a shore office dealing with paperwork at a desk. I didn't sign up to ride a desk, I signed up to be at sea. I was ready and available to go every time, and my name just never came up. But now I'm in a better job making more money with way less things to deal with, so no worries. Almost everyone will regret it at some point, and since most joined between 17 to 22, it's assumed it's worse than civilian life because there's not much outside experience to go off. Edit, feel like I need to clarify. I don't regret serving either. I'm glad I did it. But I do believe that at some point almost everyone is fed up while they're in and regrets not doing something else. That feeling probably changes, but it does happen. My buddy has PTSD and is deaf in one ear. He's deaf because that was the radio ear, and the PTSD shows up in fits of anger when his anxiety jumps for no apparent reason. He gets wound up if he feels like he's being attacked, leading to him losing jobs, losing relationships, and alienating friends. There was a time when I sincerely regretted joining the military. I worked in a section that had slowly, over time, turned into a toxic environment. I was only about 19 at the time and didn't really understand that other adults didn't have my best interests in mind and would screw me over to get a promotion statement. I spent 2 to 3 years working for a man who was sexist, racist, and unprofessionally interested in my personal life. I was told to work when I was on leave, which is not permissible unless your commander recalls you from leave. I was not recalled from leave. I was told to come in at odd hours to complete job-related tasks that were not mission-critical, think 10 p.m. on a Friday night after I had just been drinking my stress from the week away. There were times where I drunkenly walked to work as a young enlisted member because it had been a Friday night and I got a call to go in. Finally, everything came crashing down on me when I was 22 and dealing with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. A family member and one of my very best friends died within the span of 24 hours of each other. I wasn't deployed at the time, but I was away from my residence working in another state on a temporary assignment. I got back, took leave to see the funeral through, and came back to work. I told my boss that I was dealing with a lot on my plate mentally and that I really needed some help. I was told to suck it up or I'd get written up. I pushed through it as best I could, even with all of the mental health issues I had at the time. Then I had news that I was developing cervical cancer. My work quality drastically went bad and I was being threatened with paperwork daily. I was harassed at work about my race and gender. I finally went to a chaplain to seek help and was pulled back to my office by leadership for a meeting about a potluck. I was threatened with paperwork for trying to dodge a meeting and being unprofessional. My therapist and my husband, who was geographically separated from me, were the only things helping me keep my head above water. Several months of that and I was moved by a sympathetic E7 to her section to do more administrative work. I excelled at it and grew in an environment where I was treated like a person by far more empathetic people. Like some others who have posted here, I regretted my service for a couple years, especially when I joined at such a young age. That being said, I appreciate it for the opportunities it gave me and for allowing me to learn several very hard lessons in how to be a good leader to others who may one day be in those same shoes I was. The military really did give me a ton of opportunities to better myself as both an enlisted member and as a human. I think if I had the opportunity to go back and rethink taking my oath of enlistment that I would still raise my right hand. My coworkers were holes that would bully specific troops into being afraid to work, because would get yelled at if they ever made mistakes. They were apprentices. They'll make mistakes. The shifts were long and irregular. Sometimes I would walk in at 7 in the morning for work, only to be told, "Oh, I meant to call you. You're moved to nights. Come back at midnight." People got placed on weekends for 5 or 6 months at a time and only got pulled off so I could do process or deploy. People shame you for using vacation days and often deny you vacation time. It's it show. Had a platoon sergeant who did this. That shit came back to haunt him in a spectacular way. If you served during Desert Storm, you were able to get up to 120 days of leave accrued before being forced to sell some of it or lose it. I had put in leave multiple times but always denied, including once when my wife had a C-section and I needed to be home to help her. No, platoon sergeant denied it. Time to ETS out and I'm in Germany, so they start the ETS out about 90 days. You actually were to report to someone else after morning formation with instructions that anybody who tried to interfere was to be reported. I get there and this sergeant looks at my file and my accrued leave and he goes, "WTF? Is this true? You will have a 110 days of leave accrued upon your ETS date." "Yes, Sergeant." I was denied multiple times over the last couple of years. He disappears and I get called into a major's office and they ask me a bunch of questions. The next day I got called into a colonel's office and more questions, and he gets real specific about my wife's surgery. Next thing I know, my platoon sergeant is freaking out. Calls me in and asks if I really have 110 days leave accrued. That is when I remind him of every single time he denied it and the time my wife had surgery and he denied that too. All kinds of chaos started happening as I'm ETing out. I'm getting called into the commander's office and the first sergeant and all kinds of it. I had enlisted for a 4-year contract, served it, and was getting out with a 110 days of accrued leave. In those 4 years I had taken exactly 10 days of leave. As the colonel said, "I understand. I wouldn't re-enlist either. I knew a guy who regretted it because he thought that he would somehow still be able to smoke weed every day, slough off, and if he didn't like it, just quit, but honestly it was the best thing for him. He straightened up, it took a lot of work, and has turned into an amazing, disciplined person. You'd never guess he was what he used to be. I retired 9 years ago as an E7. When I was an E5, I had a troop who was constantly getting in trouble. He was good at his job, but just made bad choices in his off time. He got demoted due to a DUI. I gave him the "you gotta do better while you're in" speech. I figured he'd finish his contract and get out. I just found out he made E9 last year. I joined the reserves at 17 in Canada. The closest reserve regiment to my home was an infantry regiment. Being a weak, skinny young girl in the early 90s, it wasn't my preference. I wanted to type for my country, but was told it was no issue to transfer to admin from infantry once I was done my GMT, general military training, which was always the same anyways. So fine. After the GMT course, I was taken into a room by my instructors and course officers and informed I had failed. I could remain in the military and try again, but to take some time to consider it. 3 months, specifically. On the day I was supposed to come back and let them know what I had decided, the course officer wasn't even there. It was presumed I would quietly leave. I had actually decided to go through hell again. while I sat on a bench and they tried to figure out what to do, with many of my instructors passing by to mad-dog me or tell me I was stupid, pointless, wasting everyone's time and I should just leave. One of the soldiers who had recruited me passed by. Where was I working now? They hadn't seen me since I passed my GMT. Turns out I did not fail my GMT and was about to be dishonorably discharged for leaving. 3 months being the time limit. Next thing I knew, I was in an office with our CO who informed me that I could not bring charges against the instructors, course officers who had actually defrauded me. I would have to charge him personally and he would lose his commission etc., and it would be so sad since he hadn't actually done anything. Also, I had no right to any counsel, I had to choose now and there and then. Turns out that was a lie too. I'd actually been considering going regular forces. So nope. I made my money and didn't let it be more than a job. One that hated women, and skinny little Kermit the Frog armed women most of all. Just like any other job, poor, toxic leadership is usually the root cause. There will be good, there will be bad, and then there will be ugly.